welcome to a story I wrote a little while ago and just cleaned it up a little bit for this year. I've been waiting for a nice snowy day to read it. It is a story called Winter, and we finally have some snow on the ground, if you can see it around me here somewhere. So I thought, what a better time to read it than now. Winter. The windy plain appeared to wake outside, just beyond the single-pane window of Julian's small first-floor bedroom. A gentle whistle rattled the glass within its whitewashed frame, and the old wooden plank floorboards creaked of their own accord. Julian was 9 years old. Almost 10, he'd say. His father's eyes would narrow at him when he did. 9 or 10. Either way, he had never gone a year without watching the first flakes of snow fall outside that large, square window and nestled into the swaying straw-yellow grass of the field that ran for acres behind his parents' French-style bungalow. He usually sat and watched for those first fat, puffy flakes to lazily glide down from the sky with his grandmother by his side. She would sit to the left of him on his bed, her tissue paper sweater draped over her knobby shoulders, top button stretching to hold it in place over her short-sleeved flower-print crimpline dress. She had 3 virtually identical dresses like that one she would rotate through, but Julian always remembered her in the deep blue one, the one with vibrant, red-petaled flowers with sharp, dark swirls behind them. Were they meant to be the stems or vines? He was never sure, but he loved how they stood out so strong and bold. She would sit in silence beside him on the edge of the bed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her large glasses hung heavy on her thin, sharp nose, the warping of the lenses causing her eyes to bulge slightly. They gave her such a whimsical, gentle air that Julian often lost the thread of whatever tale she was weaving and just watched those pools of blue dart around in their milky white lake. Now Julian sat on his bed alone, his dangling feet swaying ever so slightly as the house moved and shifted as the wind batted at the slat walls. Julian's mum had taken the dress away yesterday. She hid it on him, and he had no idea where it was. He stared out the window, his right hand resting palm up on his lap, his left moving back and forth on the spot of the bed where she used to sit. He missed the rough texture of that fabric as his fingers slid smoothly against the gray-green cotton sheets that were pulled taut around his thin, threadbare mattress. This morning, she took the picture of his grandmother that Julian had. He had propped it up beside him on his bed, angled towards the window, her stern, young widowed expression staring unwavering, forever at the swaying stalks of wheat. So now he sat alone in silence, save for the ceaseless wind whistling and battering the walls of the wide, squat home that sheltered his family. His fingers stopped stroking the sheets, and he squinted, leaning forward ever so slightly. He tried to focus the outside sharper, his eyes chasing pale ghosts caught in the periphery of his vision. But they weren't flakes of snow, only the last desperate seeds of pollen looking for purchase in the richly tilled soil. His small nostrils flared as he breathed a long, shallow breath. The heavy scent of old oiled pine warmed his lungs as he stood. The boards on the floor uttered a meager protest as his slight frame weighed on them. His eyes remained fixed out the window, but no longer looked for the coming snow. With his gaze unwavering, Julian turned and walked out of his room, leaving the small single bed with its gray-green sheets, short 2-drawer dresser, and small rosewood toy chest behind. Sliding his feet into wool-lined boots at the front door, he also found himself methodically stretching his arms into his blue and red down-filled jacket. A navy scarf sewed into the collar found its way around his neck, and he slipped his hands into the knitted mittens that dangled from the frayed strings at the ends of the worn elastic cuffs. The heavy wooden front door swung silently on its old, dark iron hinges. The silent assault of the whispering wind was only cut by the sound of his feet as they crunched the frosted grass. He clobbed along through the neatly appointed short front yard, past the waist-high white iron gate, and across the gravel street. His boots crunched and kicked the gravels, causing them to skitter about, their staccato tumbles echoing into nothingness. He made his way to the field across the road where a pattern of vertical stones laid, some larger, some smaller, some elegant, some simple, but each bearing a name, each carrying a torch for one who had left, each an epitaph to the past, all but forgotten. Julian stepped carefully between the rows of stones, ensuring his footfalls landed between the plots of buried souls until he reached a plinth of about medium size with the name Julia de Groyer etched on its pebbled surface. His tiny lungs tingled as he sucked in the frigid air. White plumes of breath curled from his cracked, parted lips, obscuring the name as he stared at it across the uneven mound of soil separating him from her. He stared at the stone, her last vestige above the earth, and willed himself to cry. But the cold November air kept his tears at bay. Julian took a tentative step forward, falling towards the grave, and delicately stepped towards her tombstone. He dropped to his knees, the frosted soil crackling but refusing to give beneath him. The cold raced like tendrils of frozen lightning up through his thighs and down his shins, numbing him. He leaned his head against the rough-hewn stone, arms reaching up to embrace the monolith to his grandmother. He closed his eyes as his breathing slowed. Julian blinked, and a light dusting of soft white powder spread before him. A delicate linen blanket of purest frost covered everything. Tiny particles coated the tip of his nose, and the world about him moved in slow, steady undulations. He felt two strong arms holding him aloft, as one would carry a bundle of twigs or a bale of hay. He could hear the husky, raspy sound of his father's tobacco-tinged breath as he began to feel his chest rise and fall, pushing into his frail, limp body. Julian blinked slowly, the frost-covered tips of his eyelashes causing the landscape around him to twinkle as he was carried back through the snow-covered field and across the damp gravel road towards his house. The first flakes of winter fell all about him, and he took the last breath of his childhood and held back the tears of a man. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all later. Bye.